Yes, they are mine, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, my head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Hey, what's up, troops? Jeff Evely, the Magnanimous GenX'er Male, back with you now on this 11th day of October 2024. Time is flying by, and it has been a minute since I did my last stream. But we got a really great show here lined up for you today. It might be a little bit of a quick one, but I have Tom Quiggan backstage, ladies and gentlemen. It's been quite a while since Tom and I had a chance to do a stream together, so pretty excited for this one. And we have the crew on board as usual. So I'll go ahead and say good morning to everybody. But before I do that, I should let you know that I had a serious issue with the Rumble stream that I was just scrambling to get set up again. So I hope you guys over on Rumble are all good. It looks like you're good now. Messiah 854 over on Rumble is saying good morning, Sergeant Major. Good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. But I'm going to give a shout out to Russ here, Major Cooper, for boomering up my stream. It looks like he stole my slot over on Rumble. So if you're looking for this stream, you might end up watching his. I just made another one and renamed it. But anyway, I digress. Let's see. Who's with us here today? All right, Kelly is on board. She says, good morning from Saskatchewan. Good morning to you. It's afternoon where I am because I'm in Atlantic, but all good. Harriet says, good morning, Jeff. Good morning to you, Harriet. Mary says, good morning, watching from Alberta. Thanks for being with us. Always special appreciation to the Westerners. Good morning, everyone, says Darlene. And Darlene, you are from New Brunswick, even though you didn't say that. I know that, but thanks for being with us. Colleen says, good morning, folks. And Steve is here saying, good morning, bon matin. And Darlene has shared it, so thanks for the top cover. Share this sucker out there, folks. I could use all the help I can get. Steve says, me too. I guess everybody's sharing this thing. And Colleen says, I miss hearing Jeff singing this. Well, thank you very much. I do miss doing the streams. I have been consumed with other priorities, I'm afraid, guys. I've been out all week actually knocking on doors, just trying to collect some signatures to get my political candidacy all signed off with Elections Canada. So stand by for more on that. Things could get pretty exciting here in Cape Breton pretty soon. Gary says, good morning, Jeff and chat. And let's see. Oh, Melissa McKee is with us from Ottawa, ladies and gentlemen. She says, I believe I've heard that 12 string before. Yes, indeed you have. And Chris Dacey is in the house there, ladies and gentlemen. He says, I will be attending this event with Right Blend. So the event that we're here to discuss is the Service to Solutions Conference. The next one is going to be taking place in Whitby, Ontario. We just did one in June out in Red Deer, Alberta. And of course, it was such a smashing success that we decided to do it again. And we're taking it to Ontario this time. So hopefully we get plenty of attendance and things are another smashing success. We can take this thing nationwide. Marian LaBelle says, good morning, Jeff and everyone. And my friend Tracy is here saying, good morning, everyone. Cindy, our most faithful of all watchers, says, good morning, Jeff. Hearts, morning, friends. All right, folks, before Tom just goes ahead and bails on me for me leaving backstage for too long, I'm going to go ahead and bring him in here. Tom Quiggan, how you doing this morning, sir?
Not too bad at all. Things are interesting. It's an interesting time to be alive. And I think this conference in Whitby, Ontario on 16th of November, we're going to put a lot of the issues out front. It's stuff people need to hear about. And I think veterans at this time in Canada have a particular voice that's worth listening to. because of our experience overseas. You've been in Afghanistan, I've been in Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia, Albania, Ukraine. We've got guys who've been in, Iraq, the Golan Heights, the Sinai. And veterans' voices, more than ever, are worth listening to because we know stupid when we see it. And by stupid, I mean, the only reason Canadian soldiers go overseas is when something goes completely wrong. The only time veterans are in countries is when it's already gone to hell. And one of the things veterans know, I think, is they know stupid when they hear it, because we've been to countries where stupid has taken over. It's turned kinetic, where people are getting killed. And here in Canada right now, we're hearing a lot of stupid stuff. So, yeah, good time to start paying attention to what's going on, Jeff.
Yeah, and on that note, I think I will circle back to something that I obviously failed to do in the first place, and that is my philosophy quote for the day. And this is Thucydides, best known for the Thucydides trap, which is basically, any rising power will tend to go to war with an established power, as in China versus the U.S., China being the rising power, U.S. being an established power. And Thucydides says, the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools. I think we're pretty much in that territory right now there, Tom. And speaking of fools, this was another nice little statistical comparison here that somebody did for the New York Times and the Washington Post. And this is frequency of words denoting prejudice in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Racism through the roof, racist through the roof, racist, xenophobia, white supremacy, sexism, sexist, misogyny, patriarchy, all of this stuff over time. The graphs just go right off the charts because we're in the middle of World War III and we're being subjected to this communist psychological operation. So it's no surprise that we would see so much polarization in our society right now, because I think that's kind of the point. And just so everybody is tracking as well, it's nice to have an expert on board with us here, folks. But here is Tom Quiggan's new book, The Assassin's Mace, How Canada Became China's Weapon to Conquer America. I got my copy, and I've already started diving into it here. So far, so good. Excellent work, as always. And Tom, it kind of surprised me, actually, but I didn't realize this when I ordered it, but it's actually a fictional book, eh?
Yes and no. It's sold under fiction. It is a fictional book. It's sort of written in the sort of sense of a spy thriller, international conflict way. But all of the plot mechanisms are actually based in reality in Canada. So, for example, we talk about shared services in the book, Shared Services Canada. The greatest single threat to Canadian sovereignty right now, I would say, on the IT side, on the the cyber side, is our own beloved Department of Shared Services, which has gone from 700 data centers down to 7, which are incredibly poorly located, poorly protected, and poorly managed. So in the fictional part of the book, the bad guys attack the IT systems of the Government of Canada and shut them down in less than a day. But I would argue with you, it's not really all that fictional. It's entirely possible. I've seen how it's done. I've done a lot of research on these centers, and we are going down a very dangerous path. And that's just one example of dozens of examples in the book where China is looking to use Canada as the doormat to enter the United States. They've compromised us through IT. They've compromised us through our financial systems. They've compromised us through our governmental systems, our academic systems. For instance, Huawei, which is a government of China company, destroyed the Canadian company Nortel years ago by infiltrating it, monitoring it, and then outbidding it on contracts and destroyed it. Well, guess who's running the new Artificial Intelligence Center at the University of Alberta? Huawei.
Oh, wonderful.
We shouldn't even let these guys in the country, but instead we're providing them a massive server farm from which they can do an unlimited number of bad guy things. So yeah, it's fascinating. And Jeff knows all about this. I'll mention it to folks. Unrestricted Warfare, Chinese book written by a couple of colonels in the People's Liberation Army, a couple of smart guys. It's funny in a way because they put a picture of a guy with a gun on the cover, but it's I think it's always meant to be ironical in the sense that unrestricted warfare doesn't mean guns and bombs. It means undermining the finances, undermining the social structure, undermining the government, undermining trade, undermining manufacturing, undermining the currency, undermining the stock market, all of which is being done in real time. And I would just, one more thing I'll throw in here, Jeff. If you don't believe me, Toronto Dominion Bank just got a $3 billion fine What were they doing? They were doing money laundering for Mexican cartels on fentanyl. Now, who's behind fentanyl? China. This is entirely a Chinese-driven problem. So what is coming out, guys like Sam Cooper are writing about this, saying the money laundering was being done mostly in Mexico and the United States, but the headquarters for all of this, like where are the bosses managing this issue, are in Toronto at the Toronto Dominion Bank. So not only is white-collar crime alive and well and living in Canada, in fact, multinational, transnational, organized crime, money laundering for Chinese gangs such as the Big Circle Boys and money laundering for Mexican cartels is being run and managed out of Toronto. This is Canada. This is us. This is where we're at. And the point of this book, The Assassin's Mace, is to take a look at all the real things that are happening in Canada with respect to what China's doing, and then just fictionalizing it to show where it's going to go in the future. So yeah, it's a fun thing, and I kind of have to laugh. This TD story is being broken by the mainstream media yesterday and today as though it's a big story. Well, it's in my book. It was already there. It was known to anybody paying attention a while ago. So yeah, Jeff, fascinating times, and that's just one of the things I want to talk about at the event in Whitby.
Yeah. And my understanding too is the TD has been in bed with the Chinese for quite a while. I mean, they're willing to give them like these, a lot of the mortgages and stuff like that were written to people who didn't really have any kind of like credit history and stuff like that in Canada. They came through TD Bank. So, and they use, the Chinese, that is, they use our housing market to launder money as well. That's probably a big part of why our prices are currently 350 odd % of what they were in the year 2000. And even the Americans are only at about 150%, whereas overseas, you know, with other countries like Britain and in Europe, some of them are still at like 0% increase since the year 2000. But here in Canada, we're at 350% of an increase. And we have our financial sector finally getting busted, but it's not by our regulators, it's by the United States. So what do you think that says there, Tom?
Yeah, just give me 1 second here. I'm going to show you something. Okay, I had it just slightly out of reach. Willful Blindness, a book written by Sam Cooper. It's in its 3rd edition right now. It's worth looking at. Sam Cooper has been on about this stuff for years, pointing out that Chinese hot money poured into BC casinos. It poured into casinos in Markham, Ontario. It was pouring into political systems, i.e. members of the legislature and the provinces, et cetera, et cetera. It's been going on for years. Guys like Sam Cooper and I and other people have been talking about foreign interference, but nobody's paying attention to it. It's only this year that finally it's just gotten so corrupt and so bad that it's hitting the mainstream media, which is, I guess, good news in that sense. But as you point out, hot Chinese money has flooded into Vancouver. It's flooding into Toronto. It's driving real estate prices through the roof. At the same time, the government of Canada is on track this year to import another 2 million people into Canada. So prices of rent, prices of housing are going to go through the roof. Some of the recent projections are that average rent in Toronto is going to be somewhere around $5,000 in the next few years and over $7,000 in Vancouver. So yeah, the future of the country it's difficult. And may I just sort of jump in here right now and say the presentation I want to do in Whitby is going to ask the question, where is Canada going as a country? Where are we going as a sovereign state? And I'm going to look at the economic aspects of it because I used to work for the Bank of Canada. Something I don't tell a lot of people, but there it is. I'm going to look at the political aspects of it, and I look at the social aspects of where Canada is going. And the sort of driving question that I want to answer is violence in Canada as a result of social unrest likely in the future? And the short answer is yes, it is. We are on a path of political devastation, economic devastation, and social unrest is the logical consequence of that. And the driver will be the next recession. I particularly would encourage young folks to come out because I'm of a certain age, you're of a slightly less age than I am. But if you're in the 20 to 25-year-old range, you might want to be looking seriously at the country we're in and ask yourself, does our government have a moral compass at all? And this is a big part of the thing, is the government of Canada has no moral compass right now, and it's increasingly obvious. And also, if you're young, if you're 20, 25, 28, 30 years old, where's your economic future? And the answer is, at the moment, it's quite bleak. There's a lot of problems coming down the path. Now, everybody's saying, Trudeau's gone, Polliver's going to win, yay team. And I think, well, okay, it's probably an improvement if Trudeau goes away for, whatever reason. But the reality is, it doesn't matter who takes over. The reality is, we are facing 8, 10, 12 years of incredible difficulty as we undo the damage which has been done to us over the last several years. So that's kind of a quick wrap up of what I want to do in Whitby. And I'll just once again say, as veterans, I think we bring a certain voice to this, because we've seen what social unrest looks like, whether that's the Bosnia mass rape, ethnic cleansing kind, or whether it's the Afghanistan kill everybody in the village kind of social unrest, or whether it's the Iraq, everybody's dropping rockets on everybody's village kind of social unrest. Canadian Forces veterans have seen this. We know where we're going, and we're raising a flag saying, hey, let's not go down these paths.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that's basically been our raison d'etre since V4F formed initially. And, everything that you're talking about really kind of ties into what Sun Tzu said in the 5th century BC in The Art of War, that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And he even talks about in that book, basically, the strategy of elite capture, where they start to control the apparatchik of the state. You turn the state against the people will turn against the state, and sort of pit all the different ethnicities and religious groups off one another. So we all at each other's throats, and as soon as we stop working together, the state will just implode on its own, and we'll be subject to whatever solution they choose to impose on us. So I think that, that does seem to be the agenda. They're trying to drive us to civil war, and everything the Liberals are saying, I think, is for the purpose of provoking us more and more until they finally get that reaction that they're looking for. Thoughts on that?
One of my one of my favorite things about politics and the media right now, if you talk about it, like some of that stuff you just said, people go, that's a conspiracy theory. Jeff doesn't know what he's talking about. Why do they keep rambling on about this stuff? Well, here's my favorite response to those people. COVID-19, the Great Reset. And a lot of people claimed that the pandemic had a lot to do with the Great Reset, and everybody said, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. The book was written by Klaus Schwab, who's head of the World Economic Forum. You can buy the book on Amazon. It's still there. And in the book, he openly states that one of the objectives of the World Economic Forum during the pandemic is to try and implement as much as they can of the Great Reset. So what people talk about, well, that's a conspiracy theory. It's like, well, maybe it was conspiracy theory 5 years ago. It's a conspiracy fact now. So if you look at, for instance, the agenda of the government of Canada is to flood the zone with illegal migrants legal migrants who will become a permanent underclass who will then vote Liberal. Right now, I don't know if anybody noticed, StatsCan just came out with their latest population figures for the first half of 2024. So, so 6 months worth. A little over 1 million people have been added to the population in 6 months. So we are on track for 2 million new people in Canada in 2024. 2 million new people. That's the size of the city of Montreal itself. That's 2 million people.
Yeah.
Do we have 2 million new houses? Do we have 2 million apartments? Do we have 100,000 new doctors? And of course, the answer is no, we don't. Our GDP per capita is going through the floor. Our rent's going through the roof. So if you ask, like, what is Trudeau doing? Is he insane? People say, well, he's stupid. And I would argue, no, he's doing something. When he was first elected as prime minister, he said he wanted to see Canada as the first post-national society. And even the New York Times and the Guardian thought it was a crazy statement. But a post-national society means he wants to destroy the institutions of Canada, the RCMP, the supremacy of Parliament, the Canadian Forces, Elections Canada. Any of those institutions of the state are being ground down and worn away in favor of a massive influx of new people who will become a permanent underclass.
Yep.
And what that will do for the liberals, and it's the same policy in Germany, it's the same policy in the United Kingdom, same in USA right now, is you will wind up with a one-party democracy where the party that gets elected is the party that hands out loads and loads of free stuff to the permanent underclass. So people claim, Trudeau's failing because he's destroying the economy, because he's undermining the middle class and whatever. And I would say, like the software folks say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. This
Absolutely.
is the actual objective. So when people criticize Trudeau for bad economic policy, I'm like, yeah, you're right, but it's an intent, it's not a failure. So anyway, that's something we want to bring up in Whitby, is to tell people we have to start looking around at what's going on and try and figure out where we're going.
Yeah, it's only bad economic policy for Canadians and the people who live here. It's quite good for his masters in Beijing. So it's and I think what you're describing there is weaponized migration, which is described in one of the books that you just showed there, which is Unrestricted Warfare. They don't use the term unrestricted, they don't use the term weaponized migration, but they have a clumsier sort of translation for it. So I'm going to say weaponized migration. And you mentioned that you see the same thing happening in all these different countries. And that is another thing about the Chinese and sort of the way that they think. I think that Westerners really need to wake up to the fact that we're not dealing with a kind of conventional adversary, the kind that we're used to, where it's a head-to-head Clash of the Titans kind of military campaign. They're not going to take us on in a fair fight like that. They're going to do, like you said, absolutely everything they can to weaken us from within. And the Chinese, you see, Westerners, we play chess. So we think in terms of like key pieces, capturing the king, which is something probably analogous to a capital city in a war. But the Chinese, they play Go, and Go is actually older than chess. And in Go, all of the pieces are equal. And the objective is to capture the entire board, all of your opponent's pieces at the same time, and making it so that your opponent can't even move. So that's the strategy that I see them employing globally, for that matter. We've already seen like other nations collapse, like Sri Lanka was one of them. And looks like Brazil is going this way now, Venezuela prior to that. And the triads own Bali's at this point, basically. So, and they're surrounding kind of any adversarial countries. So I think it kind of becomes a question of how we navigate, our way out of this trap. We need to think our way through it very carefully, because they're destroying our capacity to respond to any kind of a threat, or even natural disaster for that matter, if they destroy us economically. This is going to be a pretty it's a monumental challenge, the likes of which we've never faced before as a country. So we need to think our way through it very carefully, because nobody's coming to save us. Everybody else is in the same boat. Look at where countries like France and Britain are right now, especially with their migration. Like they're teetering on the brink of collapse, and there's violence in the streets everywhere you look. And now we have people burning the flag in the streets of Canada now, and calling out death to Canada, death to the United States. I haven't read the whole book yet, Tom, but where do you see us going with this if we're going to navigate this successfully?
Well, let me just you just sort of finished off with the Islamists there. The Islamists play a major role in the book, in the sense that China has been helping weaponize some of the Islamist groups around the world, because they recognize them for what they are. They're useful idiots. They're great at spinning a victim narrative. They can get into countries and do stuff like we just saw in Vancouver. They're not shouting, death to Israel or death to the Jews or whatever, because they don't like them. They're actually shouting death to Canada, and they define Canada as a colonial power. Ergo, resistance is permissible. Ergo, they can rape and kill at will. That's where they're kind of defining us. That's where they're putting us. That kind of ideology is exactly the stuff the World Economic Forum and China, which, by the way, are kind of like that. It's actually hard to separate the two. That's very much going on. But on a more practical matter, when you talk about how do we work our way out of this, one of the key aspects of the plot is based in reality. China has taken over our drug supply system. And by drugs, I mean fentanyl and opioids on one side. But more importantly, they've taken over our pharmaceutical drugs. So if you think legal drugs you get from Shoppers Drug Mart or whatever, they've taken over that as well. In the United States, about 85 to 90% of all antibiotics come from China, or the precursor drugs come from China. In Canada, I think it's a little less. It's probably somewhere around 80%. But when you look at our cancer drugs, our antibiotic drugs, our antidepressant drugs, all that stuff, the numbers vary a bit, but we are massively and entirely dependent upon China. So if China wanted to, I don't know, just hypothetically hurt us in a period of international conflict or international tension, they could either just quit shipping us drugs, of which we've got maybe a 6 or an 8 week supply, or as I use in the book, like in the book, The Assassin's Mace, I actually describe the drugs as a weapon whereby they could keep sending the drugs, but either send placebos so the drugs do nothing, or they can poison the finished drugs so the drugs actually kill us. Now, what would be the outcome of that, of course, as soon as everybody finds out, there would be a massive black market for effective drugs in Canada. So that's just kind of another weapon we've had used against us. And by the way, who organized that? Who let that happen? We did. We let that happen. Canada and the United States have allowed China to take over massive parts of our manufacturing, including our drug supply system. And when people talk about, we live longer, our health is improved, we used to die at 50 and now we die at 78, 80. The simple reason that we live longer, health has helped, spray cleaners help. It's antibiotics. Antibiotics is what has extended our lifespan. If our supply of antibiotics go away, so does a good chunk of our population.
Yeah, it really would just be that easy too. And you mentioned something about the opioids there. That's another thing that they talk about in unrestricted warfare is drug warfare. That's another way for them to kind of sow social decay. Well, in the wake of the Vietnam War, the Chinese and their allies assumed control of the Golden Triangle. And that is where 90% of the world's opium actually comes from. And I read in Sam Cooper's book that the triads, the ethnic triads, like the Big Circle boys that you mentioned, who are running these drugs into Canada and using the money to launder it through our real estate market and casinos, that those guys are actually being directed by Chinese intelligence, and they call them whales. So basically they're like little fish while they're over there in China, and then when they get to be big enough that they would have an economic impact on China, they're directed by Chinese intelligence to go to Canada to launder all that money into our economy so that it hurts us. And at the same time, there's what was it? It was I think it was Michel Juno Katsoya that said it was like the Opium War, but in reverse. And I wanted to point that out because you're talking about like the grievance culture. This is something that, well, all communists do, is they foster this resentment, this grievance culture in a country. They've been doing it in Africa since the Africa and the Middle East since the wake of the Second World War. They've been fostering a lot of this anti-colonialist nonsense. Now, mind you, colonialism was probably one of the best things that ever happened to the world, and all the best countries to live in are former European colonies. But what they will do is they'll divide us along lines of race and class and these kinds of things to foster this resentment towards successful people, essentially, so that the lower rungs of society will end up scapegoating the most successful people for whatever their misery happens to be, and just sort of tear down the social order on their own. It's an agenda of like state collapse, and they're running the same narrative. The colonialist narrative is not only something that they're doing in Canada, but also in Israel right now. They're calling them, settler colonialists, the same way that they are in Canada, and they're using the slavery narrative down in the United States, this kind of thing where they're tearing at old wounds, in order to drive this resentment between different groups of people along lines of race and class and gender and everything else. And the thing is, though, the opium wars, I believe, is also one of these communist narratives that's being taught in our captured institutions like our schools, because there never was any mention of opium by His Majesty's opposition during the debates that led to the declaration of war that Britain issued in about 1840. There was no mention of opium in the declaration for war itself, and there was no mention of opium in the treaties that they signed with Beijing, although the treaty does mention Hong Kong. That's how the Brits got the mandate there. It was because they needed an embassy for their citizens to retreat to anytime the Chinese officials decided to get abusive with them, which is what led to the declaration of war in the first place. It was the fact that they had interned citizens and abused good faith Christian missionaries while they were there engaged in good faith commerce with the Chinese. And yeah, there was opium involved, but it was legal everywhere in the world. And China has opium dens going back to time immemorial because poppies actually grow naturally in China. So the whole thing is, it falls apart on a moment's examination. But how did there's just so much in our education system right now and so much about the narrative. How do we counter like this perception that we are so deserving in the West of what we're getting right now?
Yeah, I think one of the, if I could put my finger on like what's one thing that's wrong in Canada, if you could fix it, it might make things better. I think right now, the greatest single problem in Canada, and I think it's interesting, I want to bring this up at the Canada Christian College, is our government at the moment has no moral compass whatsoever. Anything resembling a moral compass for society has been thrown overboard. Now, Canada, of course, is a Western country. It's got a Westminster style of parliament. We're the followers on to the Renaissance, to the Enlightenment, whatever. Canada did have somewhat of a moral compass for a number of years. The government tried to do the right thing on most occasions, which is about all you can ask. And that moral compass, however you define it, was European in origin. It was Judeo-Christian in origin, whatever you want to call it. That's where our moral compass came from. And much of our country was organized along the lines of a Protestant work ethic, i.e., get a job, get out there. God helps those what helps themselves. And if we all work together, this should go along okay. Right now, I mean, you can burn a church in Canada and the government says, well, it's understandable. We're not going to get too excited about it. But Prime Minister Trudeau was just out there banging the drum because somebody sent an email to a mosque that had hurty words in it. And it sort of gives you the idea that you can burn, I think it's 112, 113 churches in Canada, and the government doesn't move. But if you send a mean email to a group of individuals who want to destroy our society, then this is worthy of national comment. So there's kind of, I think, your biggest single problem is the country lacks a moral compass. And right now you can do anything in Ottawa. And as long as you define it as progressive, or if you define it as resistance or as anti-colonial, it's okay. So I don't talk about corruption in Ottawa anymore because it's not. They're just looting the treasury. It's not like they're stealing an extra 10% and pocketing it. They're stealing the whole thing. $8 billion into the Green Slush Fund, $5 billion to the United Nations. We have no clue where it's going. So if I could, I'm going to make one point at this thing in Whitby is to say, we need a moral compass again. We need leaders who have a moral compass and are at least attempting to do the right thing most of the time. Now, just a quick follow-on to your thing on the opium wars. The fentanyl war in Canada, the United States, and Mexico is fascinating. China sells us fentanyl, finished fentanyl. They make money off it. Then they sell precursor drugs for fentanyl that they ship to Mexico. China makes money off that. The Mexican cartels make billions off that, but it's a problem for them because they have to launder the money. Who do they launder the money through? Chinese banks are doing the money laundering for the Mexican cartels. So China is skimming profits off the profits they already made by selling us the fentanyl. Then if you look internal to America, how is the fentanyl money being laundered through? It's being done through banks, through Chinese students who are over here studying, and it's being done through the Toronto Dominion Bank. And the Toronto Dominion Bank is making money off this while the Chinese government is making money off this. Now, it's not about money for China, although they love making money. The actual target of fentanyl is to destroy our society. And when most people think fentanyl, they think a homeless guy in Vancouver with a needle stuck in his arm and he's dead. That's not really the issue. Yeah, that's a problem. The problem is fentanyl has gone right through society. It's in small town America. It's in small town Canada. It is costing us billions to try and fix all these people who are overdosing. It is gutting our society because there's less and less people available to serve in the military, to serve as firefighters, to serve as healthy people in society. And the jail costs and the criminal costs of this, of course, going through the roof. So again, this is sort of a major kind of plot development thing in the Assassin's Mace, is to say, let us look at the fentanyl as it is. It's a fentanyl war. It's being used to undermine us and gut us. And they're doing it with the cooperation of Toronto Dominion Bank.
Yeah, that's how in deep we are with the Chinese right now, folks. I've been talking about this like the whole time I've been doing this podcast. Like, we are so in deep, and most people are completely asleep to it. Well, I think with a lot of the revelations lately, 11 traders, probably in the Liberal cabinet, 11 MPs anyway, who are traitors, but there may be as many as 30, according to Sam Cooper. Those are just the 11 that made it into the NCCOP report. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, you're perfectly correct. The actual number is 11. It's senators and members of parliament who've been identified as working in the interests of China, i.e. basically treason. The number of 30 to 50 is getting circulated around as the number of very senior people in Ottawa who could be a larger part of this vortex, deputy ministers, heads of organizations, that kind of thing. In the book, Assassin's Mace, I say, look, that's important. But what you need to look at is the universities. You need to look at business. You need to look at city councils. You need to look at provincial governments. You need to look at large law firms where the heads of these law firms, heads of these businesses are working in the general interests of China. Now, there's some confusion here. And you mentioned the World Economic Forum. I'll put in one last thought here. People talk about the World Economic Forum as though it's a threat over there, which it is. And then they talk about China as though it's a threat over there, which it is. However, in recent years, China's looked at the World Economic Forum and said, we're going all in. So the World Economic Forum during the pandemic twice had President Xi as their honorary speaker to open the conference. The World Economic Forum openly states they admire China because of its efficiency, i.e. throw everybody else overboard, make money, doesn't matter. Let's just go, go, go. The reality is, in my opinion, the World Economic Forum needs China. China doesn't need the World Economic Forum. When push comes to shove, China will take the World Economic Forum and just do that and flick them overboard. Whereas the World Economic Forum is wholly beholden to globalization, to global capital. And I guess closing thought on that is, if you want to be a member of the World Economic Forum, I have no problem with that. Go do it. Go sign up. Go give them your money, whatever. But if you want to work for the government of Canada as a bureaucrat, as a member of parliament, as a cabinet minister, you shouldn't be allowed to do so if you're a part of the World Economic Forum, because the aim of the World Economic Forum is to destroy capitalism, destroy nationalism, destroy the middle class. These folks are literally out to get you. And as I stated earlier, it's not a conspiracy theory. The guy that heads the thing actually writes books on it. So anyway, that's enough of my rambling for a while.
Yeah, it's amazing that they put this stuff out there. Like, they think it sounds good. Like, they're like, look at all the great things that we want to do. And people are looking at them like, that is horrifying. And my favorite part, I think, with the WEF was when they had that, they had the convention on rebuilding global trust, and the chair was the premier of the Chinese Communist Party. Like, he was going to lead this effort to rebuild global trust in the wake of the pandemic. Are you kidding me? Since when do we trust the Chinese? Since Tiananmen Square? It's astonishing to me that we ever got in this deep with them, given the fact that they have never shown any sign of acting in good faith, like whatsoever. And a couple of things that you kind of touched on there. Well, one thing for sure would be this kind of elite capture that you're talking about that is not limited to politicians. Now, obviously, it's not limited to politicians, because I've given you the example of the opium wars being propaganda that's taught in our schools, but also the senior bureaucrats, because we've seen a lot of this like mysterious kind of corruption and collapse across the institutions, like the passport office collapsed, for crying out loud. And something like ArriveCan, with the whole GC Strategies debacle, I'm looking at that and everybody's screaming about Trudeau, but I'm going, I don't see Trudeau's fingerprints on this whatsoever. And that was also the case where we had a senior bureaucrat, his name escapes me right now, but he was a Chinese national working in the public service, very senior, who deleted all of the emails that would have given us the paper trail that we needed to bring the GC Strategies fraudsters to justice. So what's up with that, do you think, Tom?
Yeah, one of the useful things about being old, which is me, is it gives you a certain perspective. How you look at something depends on whether you're looking at it up close or from far away, or whether you look at it over the last year or the last 30 years. So I've been in Ottawa now for 34 years. I was posted here for 6 months in 1990, and one thing led to another, and I'm still here. The reality is, when I first hit Ottawa in 1990, I assessed government as being a bit slow, a bit thick, a bit stupid, but it got stuff done sooner or later, and most of the time it worked mostly, which by government standards is not bad. The politicization in the government was, the prime minister is obviously political, the cabinet's political, the members of parliament are political. But as it came down into government, that politicization stopped at the deputy minister level, or maybe the assistant deputy minister level. You could see them playing politics, but from there down, the Canadian public service was mostly apolitical and mostly professional. A bit slow, a bit thick, kind of expensive, but it worked. Now, I would argue the lowest desk officer at the AS2 level doesn't do a thing without thinking, how will this look to the government? If I say something that Trudeau won't like, or if I say something Christy Freeland won't like, then I won't do it. So the entire political service now, civil service now, is almost thoroughly politicized from the top to the bottom. And when you have a civil service that becomes a servant of a political party rather than a servant of the crown, you've got some problems. Now, by example, the military. The military used to be experts at staying out of politics. And anytime the politicians wandered into it, they got politely told to piss off by the chief of defense staff, and even on occasion by the defense minister. Now, however, we're taking on this new Chinese communist model, where aid to the civil power, which to you and I, everybody, meant going out and doing snowstorms, ice storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, that kind of stuff. Aid to the civil power now is being changed to mean if a mayor has a protest in town and it's getting too big for them and they can't figure out how to handle it, they can call the military in to handle it. And it's like, whoa, hang on just a second. The role of the Canadian forces is not to beat up on Canadian citizens. It is to beat up on other people's citizens or to help Canadian citizens. But we're seeing this change in government where now they're preaching that it's going to be acceptable for the Canadian forces to use force in Canada against Canadian citizens. And if that's not the politicization of government, I'm not exactly sure what is.
Yeah, and nobody better really to bring that jackboot down than Bill Blair himself, who apparently didn't forward a critical intelligence briefing or bring it up with the prime minister. He let it sit on his. It was the warrants, right? He had warrants that he was supposed to sign, and he let him sit on his desk for like 54 days. And I think at the end of the day, well, now they're trying to throw the lowest guy on the rung under the bus and say that it was his aide actually that held on to the warrants, and that it didn't actually sit on Bill Blair's desk. But that's the kind of corruption that we see. And he was the same guy who was trying to use the Portapique massacre in Nova Scotia to advance the Liberals' disarmament agenda, which kind of comes from the UN as well, and probably therefore the Chinese Communist Party. But so it's pretty ominous, I think, in terms of like dark times ahead.
Okay, Jeff. So I got to run here, as I told you earlier, but
sorry.
2 quick points before I run. One of the
Sure.
things I'm going to do, Whitby, is I'm going to say Christy Freeland is a 3rd-generation Nazi. And I mean Nazi, not in the sense of somebody I don't like, but somebody who adheres to the ideology of the Nazi Party. And I'm actually going to go into detail showing how the grandfather, her uncle's father, and herself adhere to Nazi ideology. We're actually members of the Nazi Party. We're members of the friggin' Waffen-SS, and how she herself is closely aligned with Banderites, who are essentially Ukrainian Nazis. The other thing I want to do on stage, just to provoke the government and just to make a point, is I'm going to commit a criminal act while I'm on the stage at the college. Now, what might this criminal act be? In Tamara Leish's trial in Ottawa right now, her and Chris, the Crown prosecutor actually said he can prove that Tamara Leish is involved in a criminal conspiracy worthy of going to jail because they were wearing the same hoodie as some of the other people. So wearing a hoodie with some writing on it is proof of a criminal conspiracy, according to our thoroughly politicized Crown prosecutors in Ottawa, who are doing everything they can to make a criminal case against Tamara Leish when they have zero evidence. Now, just for fun, I'm going to wear my Freedom Convoy hoodie. I'm going to put it on partway through the presentation and explain that, according to Crown prosecutors, merely wearing a Freedom Convoy hoodie during the convoy is enough to be considered guilty of a crime in Canada.
Wow.
So where are we at? Well, we have a Crown prosecutorial service in Ottawa under one very specific Crown who is doing everything he can to support the Trudeau agenda. So as a way of provoking the Crown and showing out just how badly politicized our system has become, I'm going to do that. And by the way, this hoodie is one of the original ones. It was one of the first ones that came out at the Ark Hotel when it all got started. I think it was Gidget that ordered them. But anyway, I've kept it. So that's my intent, is to demonstrate how badly politicized and destructive our government has come by accusing you of being complicit in a crime simply for wearing the wrong kind of hoodie. Anyway, I got to run, Jeff, but
Sure
fun
thing.
as always.
All right. Appreciate it, brother. Feel free to drop out whenever you will, and I'll just kind of wrap things up here for everybody. And Tom, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Feel free to reach out anytime you got something you want to get out there or something. We'll have you back anytime. So appreciate it, man. Okay. Take care. So yeah, folks, I'll just steer you on to our flyer for this event. So what we're talking about here is the Service to Solutions Conference, hosted by Canadians for Truth, and it's going to be at the Canada Christian College. Here it is, 300 Water Street, Whitby, Ontario. Head out there and get your tickets. I'm sure you can find them on the Veterans for Freedom Facebook page, and Canadians for Truth are the ones putting it on. As you can see, we got a picture of Kelsey Sheeran here, who is an author, a Canadian veteran and author. And I have her book. I'll remember, but it's she was on Jordan Peterson there recently as well. So she's getting to be quite high profile, very successful in getting her message out there. So I'm going to be interested to see that. Oh, Brass and Unity is the name of her book, by the way. It's called Brass and Unity, and it's about how she transitioned out of the military and started selling jewelry that she made from bullet casings. So very neat. Here we have a little bit from the description of the event. It says, here from Jeff Everly, Andrew McGillivray, Tom Quiggan, Stewart Staudinger, and Daryl Smith, featuring Kelsey Sheeran, CEO of Brass and Unity and author of Brass and Unity, One Woman's Journey Through Hell of Afghanistan and Back. Featured on the Jordan B. Peterson podcast, Lex Friedman, Forbes, and more. This is an opportunity to hear from our veterans whose sacrifices provide invaluable perspectives. and that's going to be on November 16th, 2024. Doors open at 12 p.m., and you can get your tickets over there at CanadiansForTruth.ca. So I already have my plane ticket booked and all that stuff. Still always polishing these presentations off behind the scenes, folks, but it should be a doozy. It's going to be really great. Okay, and with that, I'll steer you onto the Veterans for Freedom website. You can subscribe to our newsletter by clicking subscribe here. Join by clicking join here if you're a veteran, and you can support Veterans for Freedom. Donate to our ongoing operations. I think really we're just going to be relying on the merch sales moving forward. But that's still up there on the website as an option. And don't forget about the Accountability Project. We used to have the support fund here at Veterans for Freedom that we were using. We would send the donations to somebody every month, somebody who's struggling here in Canada under this tyranny. But we recently transitioned that over to, I should say Drew did. Drew gets all the credit for this one for sure, not me. But the Accountability Project is a federal not-for-profit with a mandate to advocate for human rights, including raising funds for public interest plaintiffs and class action lawsuits, like the one that Eddie Cornell and Vinci Garces are going for right now. So this is how we're doing this. First, they had the judicial review that resulted in the Emergency Measures Act invocation being declared ultra vires. And now that we have that determination, and it says that these politicians actually operated outside the bounds of the law, they're not protected. They're not shielded from liability anymore because they didn't follow the law. So these guys are going after them personally, as in Freakland personally and Trudeau personally, which is what I think needs to happen, really. We got to bankrupt these people. They deserve nothing less than a lifetime of poverty. I would add Jody Thomas into that one, who, in my opinion, is the Stalinista behind the scenes, who really pushed for the Emergency Measures Act invocation. And she also decimated the generalship of the Canadian Armed Forces so that they could get Woke Wayner in there to impose the illegal vaccine mandate. And then they sent uniformed military men out to pregnant service women's houses to let them know that if they didn't show up for their experimental gene therapy, that they would be charged with AWOL. Just absolutely inhumane. Darkest time in Canadian Armed Forces history, thanks to Woke Wayner and the former Deputy Minister of National Defense, Stalinista Jody Thomas. Okay, and that brings us all the way back to Thucydides. And he says, the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools. So we don't want to live in that kind of society, folks, because we need strong men to bring good times. We need strong leaders in charge of things. And we have a lot of experience with hard times, us as veterans, and hard times create strong men. So hopefully you guys can find some tickets. I think there's a live stream that's set up as well. So that'd be super awesome if people who maybe can't travel to the venue can access the live stream. But there's going to be a lot of great presentations there, and I'm really looking forward to it. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I know it's a little bit of a short one, but Tom has to be somewhere, and we just want to make sure that we're promoting this event. And I haven't been very active with the live streaming lately, so apologies to the regulars. I get messages all the time, guys. I appreciate the support and everybody checking in on me, but everything's fine. I'm just pursuing some other priorities right now, namely like the political career and stuff like that. So anyway, I just need to prioritize, and there's a political career and multiple legal cases and all of this stuff. And the fact of the matter is, like, something just had to give, because you can't be good at all things at the same time. You kind of need to I hate this expression too. You need to pick your battles. I always hated that expression when I was in the military, because I'm like, we literally belong to a profession that is defined by the fact that we do not pick our battles. Of course, I just try to right every wrong, but it's not possible for one guy. All right. And that's it for me, guys. I'll say goodbye to some of you here. And let's see. Gary is here saying, have a great day, everyone. Colleen. Oh, I skipped over Colleen. Colleen says, thanks, Jeff. Have a great day, folks. Yes. And it is happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Kelly. I'm looking forward to some turkey there at my mother's house on on Thanksgiving, so that should be great. And Mary is saying happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Marion says thank you, Jeff, as always, great show. My pleasure. Darlene says great podcast as always, Jeff. Have a great Thanksgiving weekend, all. And Cindy says thanks, Jeff, as always. Hearts, have a great Thanksgiving weekend, and you as well. Evelyn says take care, all. And Terry says thank you both. Great show. Yeah, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure. And Marion says, thank you, Jeff. Harry Thanksgiving. Everyone, I think you mean happy. I know what you mean. It's all good. And Victor says, you do you, Jeff. Thank you for your service. Yeah. Thanks, Victor. Marion's saying happy, not Harry. Okay. And what about you guys over on Rumble? How you doing over there? Oh, no recent comments here, but that's all good. I'll say goodbye to you as well. And with that, folks, I really appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, stay frosty and stay safe.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs.